Great. All right. Okay, next slide. Welcome everybody to the June meeting of the Master Gardeners of Sonoma County. We have a great talk tonight that you'll hear more about shortly. Paul Piazza is here to talk about water resource management in Sonoma County and really talk about the watershed that that brings the water from the tip top all the way to our faucets. So he'll be up in just a couple of minutes. So, oh, Mimi's got news here. Ah, Mike, you can go home.
Okay, see you later.
What that was all about is that two of our master gardeners this week have evacuated because of the Point Fire, and they have been in our thoughts every day. Mike joined us, and we'll be doing the introductions later. He's evacuated as we speak, and we just got word that he can go home. So that is we are really thrilled. I mean, we're thrilled not only that you got the notice and you can go home tonight, but we're thrilled that you have a house to go home to, Mike.
Yeah, me too.
So anyway, so with that announcement, next slide, please. Sorry about that. I was excited to know that that had been lifted. All right. So June is the last monthly meeting in our fiscal year, and we are and it's the last time that I will be introducing this meeting as president, because after this month, I will happily be the co-president. So Tammy Stolte will be joining me as co-president for the next year, and that is really exciting to me that I get to share that. We have a great new board coming in, and what that means for all of you is that some really good planning and support for our Master Gardener organization that makes the projects all of you work on even more effective. So I'm very excited about that. And I'm also very excited that next month we have our Master Gardener Appreciation. I guess we're turning it into the Master Gardener Appreciation Picnic. And this year we're really excited that we're having it at one of our own gardens at Los Guilicos. The North area is planning it, and in a deviation from past years, we're also really excited that we're going to have tacos. We're going to have a taco truck there serving up some of the best tacos in Sonoma County. So we're looking forward to seeing you all there. And it's going to be a great time. There's lots of other stuff going on, but I'm just going to say I'm not going to tell you. You're going to have to read your weekly email. So please do that. And also just one final reminder, which I'm going to say, but I know Mimi's going to say it in a second anyway. If you have not completed your reappointment, please do it. Otherwise, you're going to get one of those calls from me or John Dennis saying, if you don't, bad things will happen. Amy, I'm going to advance next slide and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Anne. And sorry, I'm a little distracted because there's 8-week-old kittens underfoot and up to shenanigans. So sorry for my distractions tonight. Let's see. Thank you, Anne. That's exactly what I was going to remind everybody. I checked this morning and we actually have 50% of our Master Gardeners have reappointed. That might be a new record for us by mid-June. And I've been sending out the regular reminders because I'm gone for the next 2 weeks. Our membership director, John Dennis, is gone next week. So once I get back, we're very close to the deadline. If you haven't reappointed, yes, Anne is right. Don't make me or John or one of our board members have to call you to find out whether you're going to reappoint and stay as an active Master Gardener. Please, if you have any questions, you're short on hours, don't hesitate to reach out to me, send me an email, send John an email, and we can discuss what your options are. But hopefully, as you're all aware, if you don't complete reappointment, it's a responsibility, personal responsibility of every Master Gardener to do so. And if you don't complete it, I will be forced to resign you. And then we move into a different set of circumstances with trying to get you recommitted back and active back in the organization, but there are options for that as well. So I think that's it for me. We just talked at the picnic. There's still lots going on. May was just a whirlwind of events going on. A lot of our Master Gardeners worked a very, very fun event in partnership with Kendall Jackson, which we haven't done in quite a few years. They're going to make a very generous donation to us for our participation in that event. And what a concept. Everybody looks like they had a blast from all the pictures. So lots going on. Farmers market's active. County Fair is ramping up. We're super excited about our second year partnership with Sonoma Water and Paul Piazza and his team on the demonstration garden at the County Fair. So as always, summer is a super busy season and lots of opportunities. If you haven't made your hours to get some volunteer hours in and finish up your commitments. So I'll turn it back over to you, Ann.
All right, thank you. And the next slide, and actually, I'm going to turn it over to John Dennis, our Director of Membership, who's going to take us through our monthly recognitions. The
Thank you,
amazing
Ann.
Master Gardeners who have done remarkable things in the last month and year. John, take it away.
Thank you, Ann. Yeah, this month the board's been especially generous. So we had a number of recognitions this month, starting with a gold badge membership for Janet Baracco. I don't know if Janet's here, but I want to congratulate you, Janet, on completing your 1,000 hours of service to the organization. We really appreciate it. And your badge is in the office. We can't give it to you tonight, but if you can stop by the office, or I'm sure we can bring it to the picnic in July. Are you here, Janet? Okay, and then so we'll move on to monthly recognition. Our first recognition award goes to Kathy Conover for her excellent efforts with the challenge of getting all the schedules for this year's farmers markets entered into the VMS calendar system. It is not an easy task, and as it happens to be one with a deadline, but Kathy took care of it all without complaint. And even with frequent changes, she continued to provide great support to the market teams. And we thank her for this and everything else she does for the Sonoma County Master Gardeners. Thank you, Kathy. Are you here tonight?
I am. Thank
Oh,
you.
would you like to say a few words,
Well,
Kathy?
Well, I sort of laughed when I got the message that I was going to be getting this recognition. I thought, I'm really not a great gardener. But
But
it
you're a
has
great
been-
master gardener.
but it's been kind of fun to do the calendars because I've been in contact with lots of nice people, and it's lovely to finally meet them at different events and things and attach faces to their names. And so it's a rewarding job to make sure that the calendar is full of events that people can volunteer for. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. And each of the recipients gets a special master gardening notebook, and again, we can deliver that to the picnic next month
Okay.
if you don't have a chance to go by the office before then.
Thanks.
Thank you. And so our next recognition goes to Nancy Creveling and Bryce Sumner for their leadership with the Container Gardening Project. Nancy and Bryce are frequent and popular speakers on container gardening, and together they've been willing to travel to libraries, demo gardens, and other venues all around the county to conduct container gardening workshops. They've inspired many people to grow food, even in small spaces. And of course, we also appreciation is in order for Nancy's recently completed 4-year term with the board of directors as the treasurer. So thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Bryce. Are the two of you here tonight?
I'm here tonight, but
Hi, Nancy.
doubt that Bryce is here. Yeah, it's been fun, and I've enjoyed getting to meet a lot of people, and it's been fun learning from Bryce on container gardening and the artistry that can be involved in that too. So it's been a great partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're not done yet, because we'd also like to recognize Laura Southworth, Leslie Hart, and Janet Baer for their work with the amazing work spearheading the class of 2024 training team. It takes a village to put together our training class. And we had a super core team helping coordinate this effort this year, creating a solid base of training for bringing new master gardeners into our program is incredibly important. And the class of 2024 benefited from having the very capable oversight of Laura Southworth, who was supported by some very capable fellow master gardeners. Laura worked countless hours before the class launched and over the 5 months of class in ensuring all the class instructors were arranged and presentations received and uploaded, as well as regular weekly communications and daily interactions with the trainees. Leslie Hart updated class outlines as well as reading questions for each individual class and updating the final exam. Leslie was also co-instructor with Mary Lou Milkoff and Paul Piazza for our water management class. And Janet Baer brought her formidable skills to bear on our 2-class botany trainings, as well as the botany practicum. Janet also helped along with fellow core InfoDesk teammates Michael Cambor, Laura Southworth, and Diane Kenworthy in developing the applied information desk training that happens when the class is completed. So thank you to everyone who helped make this class a success, but special thanks to you, Laura, Leslie, and Janet, our core team of superstar master gardeners. Thank you. And Leslie, I see you on my screen. Would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, sure. We had just a great team. We enjoyed working together, and very satisfying to do that. And we thank all of those who supported us and other master gardeners who, like Linda King and Kim Pearson, who also taught a class on introduction to plants. And we encourage all the newbies to jump in and try things. And also get yourself signed up for that desk training. Get that out of the way.
Good advice. Laura, are you here?
Oh, I
Janet?
am. I'm here, and thank you. And Janet was not able to attend tonight, so I have a quote from her, but it was a bit of a wild ride, but got started getting organized a year ago, at least from now. And it's just working with Leslie and Janet is so wonderful, along with everybody else that was on the team. And Mike Camber, who's here tonight, was managing chats, and Eartha was helping us, and Kim Roberts and Carla Tarazzi. And we just had a lot of people, jumping in to help doing this or that. And it was just a really amazing experience. And Janet's quote is, "Thank you. I had a great time." So even though it's one hell of a lot of work, we really enjoy doing it. It's rewarding and interesting and fun to be part of such a productive team.
Yeah.
So that's my.
All right. Well, thank you all. We all appreciate it. All right. So with this, I hand it back to Mike.
Yeah, Mike, and I put this up for you to share with us.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, our colleague Dave Burnley passed away this last or two. And I thought I just wanted to say a few words. For those of you that knew him, you probably were touched, especially by his mentorship and his, real charm and friendliness and organizational skills. And he was a great friend, and he will be missed by all of us. Interestingly enough, his elaborate water catchment system that he had in his garden was something to be marveled at, and he would have probably really enjoyed the talk tonight. So I just wanted to have you maybe have a few minutes, a few seconds of silence in honor of Dave, and we'll be thinking about him during the lecture tonight. And as we go forward. Okay, now I think it's time to get to the talk. Although Laura sort of gave me credit for this, it was an idea I had that I was looking at over things and looking for topics that we could discuss, and it just seems so important. Talking about water in this county, ever since I moved here almost 10 years ago, it's been a topic of discussion, not only amongst master gardeners, but amongst pretty much everybody you talk to. So I thought it would be important to really discuss it, to discuss our water issues, the watershed, and everything else. So when Paul came to teach the new class, Laura had the idea of seeing if he could speak to us as well, since she really thought he was fantastic in class. And so we got Paul to volunteer to do this, and we really appreciate it. For those of you that don't know him, Paul Piazza is the Water Use Efficiency Manager in the Engineering and Resource Planning Division at Sonoma Water. And he's been a collaborator with the Master Gardeners for a while now, with responsibility for managing the activities of the Sonoma Marin Saving Water Partnership. Partnership represents 13 water utilities in Sonoma and Marin counties that have joined together to provide regional solutions for water use efficiency. Paul has a degree in environmental studies from the University of California, Santa Cruz, and has 18 years experience in water resource planning and managing water efficiency programs for retail and wholesale water utilities in Sonoma County. And he's going to be speaking to us about water management in our county. And without further ado, I will present Paul Piazza.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate the kind words. And again, thank you for the invite tonight. I'd like to make this as collaborative as possible. So again, if you have questions, you want to put those in the chat. Looks like Mike's going to be coordinating things to bring those to me as we go through the presentation. So with that, I'll go ahead and share a screen and we'll get underway. All right, good. Everybody see the presentation full screen?
We sure can.
Okay, great. Fantastic. All right, well, you've got my name. We're going to talk a little bit about water resources management. We're going to just start out with just kind of an overview about the water management agencies that are key in California, starting at the state level, and then a little information about how that trickles down to regional and other districts and cities that actually provide water direct to customers. I'll talk a little bit more in depth about Sonoma Water's water system and our water sources. We're going to talk a good bit about the challenges and how we're implementing projects and doing planning to meet those challenges. And I'm sure you're probably aware of a number of those already, but hopefully this will be some new information and generate some questions. And then I just want to touch on conservation and efficiency, because really that's so important in water management, not just for Sonoma County, but throughout the world, throughout the country. And I know Mike comes from Florida. Water conservation is a huge aspect of what they do in terms of water management in that state and other areas around the country. So, but with that, we're going to come full circle. Just a quick little water facts, because this is always a good thing to recall. Specifically that, if you're talking about water on this planet, just a small sliver of what's available on the planet in terms of water is usable by us. Largely it's salt water, but for that water that is fresh water, which is roughly about 3% of all the water on the planet, about 2% of that 3% is unavailable, meaning it's locked up in glaciers and polar ice caps, it's in the atmosphere, it's in the soil, but at a depth that's not practical to extract at an affordable cost. And so what that leaves us with in terms of the water that's available for our purposes is about 1% of what's available on the entirety of the planet. Of that 1%, about 99% of that is groundwater. And that leaves the remainder, a very small fraction of fresh water, surface water, really, that's found in lakes and rivers. In our region, you know, like most of the areas around the world, we're seeing stressors from population increase over time. So, you know, we don't have new water sources that we're able to tap. So we have to make do with what we have for a growing world. And that means conservation plays a significant role. And I'll talk a little bit more about this quote, making water conservation a California way of life, which happens to be related to new regulation that is getting underway in the state. So switching to a description of the water management agencies. So there's really two primary water agencies in California: the State Water Resources Control Board, which has oversight of 9 additional regional water quality control boards. These regions are essentially 9 different hydrologic regions in the state of California. For us, we're in the North Coast region. Each of these boards, whether it's the State Water Resources Control Board or the regional boards, have members. And the state board is essentially 5 full-time salaried positions. Those positions are appointed by the governor to 4-year terms, and they're confirmed by the California Senate. And then similarly for the regional water quality control boards, there's quite a few more board members on each of those that serve. They're also appointed by the governor. In terms of what we do at these boards, I'll get into that a little bit later in the next slides. The other main agency is the California Department of Water Resources. I'll talk about that too. And then Sonoma Water, we're down at the regional level. We're a special district, we're a regional wholesaler, which means that our customers are the local cities and other small water districts that then in return retail water direct to customers, whether that's residential customers or businesses. So the State Water Resources Control Board essentially has a lot of the duties that are detailed here in the bullet points. Collectively, they're known as the water boards. We kind of lump the regional water quality boards with the State Water Resources Control Board. And really, they're dedicated to a single mission, which is really just to ensure that we have abundant clean water for human uses and the environment, and that their mission is to protect and sustain that for California's future. In terms of water quality, the way that works, essentially, the Federal Clean Water Act gets passed down to the states. In California, we have what's referred to as the Porter-Cologne Water Quality Control Act, which is what the regional water quality boards are working to implement. But essentially they're responsible for protecting the water quality for roughly 1.5 million acres of lakes, 1.3 million acres of bays and estuaries. There's roughly 210,000 miles of rivers and streams that they have oversight of. And then, of course, 1,100 miles of coastline on the state of California as well. In terms of water rights, just to touch on that briefly, there's really 2 types, riparian rights and appropriative. The riparian rights really attach to the land along a stream and the underflow of the stream as well, for use of the stream's natural flow on that land. And then the appropriative rights really apply to first in right, first in time. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but essentially the difference is that appropriative rights allow those with those rights to use that water in any stream for use on another piece of land than what's connected to the stream through a riparian connection. Riparian rights typically have priority over appropriative rights. So, during times of shortage, they have the rights to that natural stream flow. And then as this first bullet under appropriative details, in terms of times of shortage, this first and right sort of comes into play, such that the oldest that's authorized to divert water under an appropriative right has essentially the priority over someone who comes along later in time and establishes a later appropriative right. All right, and there's lots of links in all these slides. I'm happy to make these slides available at the end of the presentation. So where you see links, if you want to follow up for more information, that's what the link will take you to. The Department of Water Resources is a little different than the State Water Resources Control Board. Essentially, they were created at a time and known that they were going to manage water rights in California. And due to the conflict of interest, they needed to have a separate agency from the State Water Board so that they could be managed separately. But if you've heard of the State Water Project, which is the large series of water impoundments or dams in the Central Valley from Shasta on down, that supply water to the State Water Project. It's primarily agricultural uses, but a good portion of that does make its way down to Tehachapi at the southern end of the Central Valley and does get passed on to Southern California. There is also the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. There are some federal water projects also in the state of California, and they are separate. So those are operated by the Bureau of Reclamation and not by DWR. But we work a lot with DWR, both in terms of funding opportunities. They do a lot of planning. The State Water Plan in particular comes to mind. They help develop scientific solutions and studies and really are there to assist agencies like Sonoma Water and other retail agencies in the state in meeting either regulatory requirements or in help with managing our water resources locally. So they're an ally that we turn to a lot in our work. I want to mention groundwater agencies quickly too. This is relatively new based on legislation that was adopted and formed the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act in 2014. Here, essentially, the Management Act requires the state sustainable management of groundwater basins and subbasins throughout California over time, and particularly for those basins that are designated by the Department of Water Resources as either a medium or high priority for essentially stressors or issues that are affecting the sustainable health of those groundwater basins into the future. The legislation required the formation of groundwater sustainability agencies, meaning DWR offered local agencies to manage local groundwater resources. And there was a timeline attached for the formation of those groundwater sustainability agencies. There was additional requirements for those, we call them GSAs, to complete groundwater sustainability plans. And there are 3 basins in our area, Santa Rosa Plain here, Petaluma Valley, and Sonoma Valley. Santa Rosa Plain and Petaluma Valley are designated as medium priority basins. The only high priority basin in our area is Sonoma Valley. And so the groundwater sustainability plans for these agencies have been completed, and they're now starting to leverage a big chunk of grant funding through DWR to carry out some work to put in place both programs and measures and essentially monitoring systems to help ensure that this groundwater is managed sustainably over time. Just so you understand, when we're talking about groundwater, we're talking about water confined to substrate in the soil. Sometimes people think of groundwater aquifers as being underground rivers or underground lakes, but essentially it's a soil medium that has pore spaces, and that pore space becomes filled with water. And that's what you see here depicted as the blue areas. If you were to plant your garden, you're essentially planting in the soil medium at the top of the water table or above the water table, which is this dotted line here, and that's known as the unsaturated zone. Typically, stream flow is connected to groundwater sources, both in terms of recharge, but also, streams can actually benefit and pick up volume from groundwater that flows into stream courses. That's what they've referred to as gaining streams. There's also losing streams, which essentially the flow in the river that's percolating down through the gravel substrate at the base of the river is contributing recharge to the aquifer. And there is a time frame that is considered in terms of aquifers, meaning shallow aquifers typically are recharged due to the hydrologic cycle, so natural rainfall. And sometimes that could occur in a matter of days to weeks to months. So over the course of one rainy season, you might get some really good recharge in shallow aquifers, whereas deeper aquifers or aquifers that are confined to bedrock might be on the time frame of centuries or millennium. And so the management of those deeper aquifers is a much bigger concern in the case of wells that are creating to groundwater subsidence, or even in our case where we're adjacent to bays and estuaries where there's salt water, we get saltwater intrusion at some times where we have to mitigate for that. So we're going to switch now to the regional level and talk a little bit more about Sonoma Water's water system and our supplies. Essentially, we're your local agency. We are the regional wholesaler for not only Sonoma County, but also for the northern portion of Marin County. I want to make sure that you understand that we do not rely on snowpack for our water supply in Sonoma County. We're very much connected to the Bay Area and statewide news agencies. And so what makes it into the news often is talking about the adequacy of California snowpack and meeting our water needs. And we have no connection to the State Water Project. And so all of the snow melt that feeds into the reservoirs and contributes to providing water for people and agriculture in the Sierra is different from Sonoma Water. We're 100% reliable on the hydrologic cycle that falls within the Russian River watershed, with some connection to the Eel River, which I'll talk about in just a minute. We don't have any water that we supply to agricultural customers, even though 80% of the water in California really goes towards agriculture. However, as a regional wholesaler, our customers is urban, 100%. And that's the same case with those agencies locally that supply water directly to businesses and homes. They're primarily providing water for those businesses and homes. They don't provide water for agriculture, with perhaps some slight exception for the use of recycled water. Any case, when you see water coming out of the tap, just remember it's all about how much water we get every year due to natural rainfall. not the Sierra snowpack. So again, we have a system that's wholly reliant on the Russian River watershed. At the top of the map here, at the very top, you'll see Lake Pillsbury up in Lake and Mendocino counties. This is really a connection to historic transfer, or what we refer to as an interbasin transfer of water from the Eel River watershed into the Russian River. And that we'll go into some more detail on later in the presentation. But that's kind of the headwaters of our system. PG&E's Potter Valley Power Project essentially provides a little bit of water after it goes through the tail race to the Potter Valley Irrigation District, and then there's some abandoned water that ends up in the East Branch of the Russian River and helps contribute to storage in Lake Mendocino and Mendocino County. We operate Coyote Dam in collaboration with the Bureau of Reclamation. The differentiation there is that we operate the dam for water supply. The Bureau of Reclamation operates the reservoir for flood control. Our second and most primary water reservoir is Lake Sonoma and Warm Springs Dam. It's much larger, and I'll show some slides a little later that depicts that. But the watershed itself really is the river, and it flows for roughly 116 miles from its headwaters out to its mouth at the Pacific Ocean and Jenner. And the watershed encompasses roughly 1,500 square miles that helps feed into our system. And then right down here, you can see our diversion facilities, which are the Wohler Mirabel area, which is right down near Forestville. We have a series of aqueducts, very large pipe systems that help deliver that water from our Mirabel facilities out to the cities and water districts, both in Sonoma County and Northern Marin. This is a little closer look of our Mirabel diversion facilities. Essentially, up here, if any of you have been to the Sonoma County Riverfront Regional Park, Sonoma Water owns that land. And then we have a series of collector wells just downstream of that area on both sides of the river. Down here, we operate, and this is just downstream of Wohler Bridge, if you know where Wohler Bridge is on the river. We have another additional set of collector wells. And then in the summer months, we inflate a rubber dam. And the dam has the purpose of improving the groundwater infiltration of the water in the river, and allows us also to divert water in the summer into a series of sedimentation ponds. So when we divert the water out of the river, these settling ponds allow any of the material that's in the water to settle out. And then that water is transferred into a series of infiltration ponds that essentially improve our ability to generate groundwater at the peak demand times of summer. This picture here is kind of a cutout of one of our rainy collector wells. These are very large, roughly 13-foot diameter concrete caissons that extend underground anywhere from 60 to around 100 feet, depending on the particular well. There's a series of perforated lateral intake pipes that help with our collection of water. As the pumps, the turbines here kick on, they create a cone of depression and a pressure gradient that helps pull water that's in suspension in the pore spaces of the gravel substrate adjacent to the caisson through the filter medium and make it available so it can come up and feed into our aqueducts. What's really unique about our system is what we call a riverbank filtration system, and I'll touch on that on the next slide. Because we have an inflatable dam, we also maintain fish ladders and a permanent viewing station to allow good fish passage for those salmonids that are migrating upstream, and that includes Chinook salmon as well as coho and steelhead. If you've never visited our facilities, we do offer public tours, and especially in the fall months, before the winter rains come and the Chinook salmon are starting to enter the river, it's a great time to go down into the viewing station and check that out. In terms of our water quality, I mentioned this riverbank filtration system. As the picture previous was showing, we just have these infiltration ponds, and that gravel substrate is essentially our filtration system. So you hear a lot about the Hetch Hetchy water system of the Sierra Nevada that feeds water to San Francisco and some of the other big cities in the Bay Area as being, you know, the best water quality available. But what they don't talk a lot about is the fact that that water travels from Hetch Hetchy in an open canal down to the Bay Area and is, you know, open to anything and all things that fall and swim and move about in that canal. And consequently, they have a water treatment system in the Bay Area that undergoes a lot of additional treatment and filtration at a great deal of cost, in particular due to the energy cost. Whereas when we collect that water from our wells, it's highly cleaned from the gravel substrate. If you just were to work off the testing of the water, there's no need for any additional treatment. We are required by federal law to add some additional chlorine for disinfection. And then because groundwater in California is naturally hard, we do offer a little bit of essentially a pH buffer that gets added to the water just to make sure that it's not highly corrosive to what is the typical copper piping that is used in homes and businesses for your water system. Other than that, it's an amazing system from the standpoint of cost savings. And I think we're one of 7 examples of this type of water system worldwide. And it's one of the reasons why our water rates remain very, very affordable as compared to the rest of the Bay Area and the rest of California in general. So just looking a little bit more at our primary water supply reservoirs, this is a storage graphic of Lake Sonoma. And you'll note here at the top that the black line is indicating current storage in the reservoir, and then we have a couple of previous years. I do want to point out that in the water industry, our calendar for water years runs October through the end of September. And that's really recognizing that we are really keyed in at this winter time of year when we in California get all of our rainfall. So we start tracking and paying close attention to our water supply in the fall and in the early winter portion when we're making a lot of our decisions about how we're going to have to manage our water supplies and our reservoirs through the peak demand months of summer. You'll note on this graphic, there's a couple of other lines here. So the blue area below the large dotted line represents the water supply pool. That's the water in the reservoir that's under the management of my agency, Sonoma Water. That water is the water that we store for both environmental purposes and for uses for all of you. You'll also see that there's a note for a flood control pool. Technically, everything above the blue area is managed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So anytime the water fills up the reservoir into the flood area of the reservoir, the Army Corps takes over operations for flood control. And then you'll note there's this little sliver here called the minor deviation pool, and that's related to a new operational plan that's in place for both of our reservoirs called FIRO, or Forecast Informed Reservoir Operations. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in a bit, but I want you to take a look at these other lines, and particularly starting in 2022. This was back in the most recent drought year, so which started in essentially 2021. We got very little rainfall that year, and consequently, we were, managing very cautiously releases from Lake Sonoma through the peak demand months. We are under a water rates requirement that if our water levels at Lake Sonoma drop below 100,000 acre feet in any calendar year prior to July 15, we have to mandate a 30% conservation for our customers. We didn't quite fall into that problem in the fall of 2022, but we got very close the following year, just after the first of the year, really, in January of 2023. But that's when we had a huge series of atmospheric river storms. I think that year we had 12 atmospheric river storms back to back, and really a remarkable recovery in water storage that year. Within a month's time, we went from just below 100,000 acre feet well into the flood pool by March. So we can't count on that every year, but we were really happy to get those storms. This is a snapshot of Lake Mendocino. This is a much smaller reservoir, so roughly 250,000 acre feet of water supply in Lake Sonoma. At Lake Mendocino, we really kind of cap out around, the whole reservoir is right about 122. But our water supply pool is typically closer to 80 or 90,000 acre feet, depending on how the water is managed in the spring months. Again, you'll note a water supply pool. This one looks a little bit different. Lake Mendocino is what we call kind of a much flashier reservoir. It will fill much quicker during the winter storms just because of the size of the reservoir being smaller. It'll also drain much faster if we're not carefully managing it. And so the Army Corps, recognizing that flashiness, has a little bit different schema for the water supply pool. And during the peak rainfall months, they want to preserve more storage in the reservoir to capture incoming rainfall to attenuate the chance of flooding downstream on the Russian River. But as we get into the later months of spring, and those storms tend to be less impactful, this water supply pool starts climbing, and USPR will allow us to store more water in the reservoir later in the spring as the chance of flooding downstream is lessened. One of the things I would like to talk about in terms of Lake Mendocino is that historically, the interbasin transfer of water from the Eel River watershed through the Potter Valley Hydroelectric Project is really what made this reservoir go. This reservoir was constructed in 1949. It came after the Potter Valley Project, and its design and mission essentially relied on about 160,000 acre feet of transfers coming from the Eel River over to the Russian Riverside to keep this reservoir viable and full, and to meet downstream needs both for in-stream flow requirements for fish and environment purposes, and also for agricultural uses and all of the cities that rely on it in the Russian River. Back in 2006, the Potter Valley Project went through a relicensing process with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and due to some fishery concerns that were raised on the Eel River, the diversions were required to be reduced, and pretty significantly. So after about 2006, those diversions from the Eel River dropped to about 60,000 acre-feet. And then more recently, with PG&E's decision not to continue to maintain their hydroelectric project, they're now dropping those transfers to around 30,000 acre-feet, and really just to meet their water supply obligations to the Potter Valley Irrigation District. And consequently, this creating some problems for Lake Mendocino, and this reservoir is really going to have a challenge in the future without some additional help. So I've talked about Sonoma Water systems, and Michael, I don't know if there have been any questions posed up to this point. If not, I'm happy to carry on, but I'm also happy to check in with you to see if I go on to challenges, there's any questions.
There's only one question so far, and that is, what is the water source for all of the vineyards and wineries in Sonoma County?
It's mixed, but for those vineyards that have riparian rights along the river, it's surface water from the Russian River. And then the majority is groundwater. So they have their own groundwater wells, and we have, no jurisdiction over that. So that's typically what ag is reliant on. I don't know if the person that asked that question, if that satisfied your question, or if there was something other you were asking.
No, I think that's probably good.
All right. All right, well, I'm going to shift gears now and talk a little bit about some of our challenges and some of the work and projects that Sonoma Water's been involved in to overcome them. So I've been talking about the Potter Valley project a lot, and so just so you can understand a little bit more about this is a really old hydroelectric project. It's been around for over 100 years. If you are taking a look at this photo, this is a redwood diversion tunnel. And it's held together by redwood staves and iron. And it's still that way today. Redwood's an amazing material. PG&E has, been managing this, I think, since around 1926 is when they took over the project. They have about a 9 megawatt power plant that this diversion serves. But as I mentioned, due to seismic concerns at Scott Dam, due to changes in the power portfolio, whether it's because of renewals or other issues, it's no longer cost effective for them to operate this power project. And consequently, they were facing a deadline by 2022 to complete a relicensing of this project. But rather than continue down that path, they've chosen to go through a decommissioning process with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. This project includes 2 dams, one in Lake County, one in Mendocino County. Scott Dam is the dam that essentially creates Lake Pillsbury in Lake County. And then downstream of that, there's essentially a secondary dam at Van Arsdale, which is what backs the water up enough to create a gravity diversion into the tunnel that feeds the penstocks and comes out at the hydroelectric plant in Potter Valley. Eventually that gets released into the East Branch of the Russian River, and as I mentioned previously, contributes to storage at Lake Mendocino. This is a real problem when this came to our attention, because their plan to decommission these dams and do away with this historic diversion into the Russian River based on modeling results would mean that the water supply in Lake Mendocino will probably go dry in about 7 out of 10 years, just due to the small watershed and the natural hydrology that would contribute to storage alone at Lake Mendocino without this diversion. So that's a big concern of ours. We consequently, can't get to my little cursor here. Hang on just a moment. I gotta turn this off. There we go. Wouldn't allow me to advance a slide. So with their decision to decommission this project and the fact that we are taking a look at the effect of that on our water supply, you know, there's a huge reliance on Lake Mendocino as a cold water storage pool for releases into the Russian River in the fall at the time when migrating Chinook salmon are entering the river. And without that continued diversion, the fisheries in the Russian River would be imperiled. And so there was a discussion that started with Congressman Jared Huffman to form a two-basin solution, essentially meeting with the interests in the Eel River side and Russian River side to come up with a solution for this issue long-term. That essentially is culminated in a new entity called the Eel Russian Project Authority to look at the next steps for maintaining a diversion after PG&E's decommissioning process. I'd like to just, you know, be very clear that we don't have any real influence on PG&E's decision. Their project is managed by them under the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So their decision to go through decommissioning and essentially license surrender, we can certainly comment as part of the public comment process, but ultimately they're moving forward with this and they're going to be removing the two dams. This is really good news for a lot of folks on the Eel River side in terms of its beneficial effects on the fisheries and the eel. Scott Dam that formed Lake Pillsbury had no fish passage whatsoever. And in spite of all of the efforts to look at solutions to keep that facility and implement fish passage by PG&E, the cost was really just insurmountable. And then there's been updated studies on the seismicity in that area with the location of Scott Dam that, again, make retrofitting and maintenance of that facility not cost effective going forward. So the two-basin solution really led to this decision to form a new project authority to look at next steps in the river to create an entity that could take over and build a new diversion facility that allows for very good fish passage and the restoration of the surmounted paths upriver on the eel, but still maintaining some beneficial flow to the Russian River side as well, to the benefit of downstream users of the upper Russian River and for fisheries also. There's a lot of work yet to be done to make this happen. PG&E essentially is still going through their relicensing, or not their relicensing, their license surrender application. They're expected to have that in place by 2025 based on the timeline dictated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They've recently applied for, I think, a 9-month extension to that request, and they are working with us a little bit to understand if our work can dovetail off of what they're planning to do in terms of their decommissioning. But none of the risk will go to this Eel Russian Project Authority in terms of the actual dam removal and mitigation of any environmental concerns related to sediment transfer down the river after the dams are out. So with that as a concern, we've been monitoring this for quite a few years, and coupled with our understanding of some concerns related to climate change, we've been involved in a project called FIRO, or Forecast Informed Reservoir Operations. This is a joint project with NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, Scripps Institute of Oceanography's Western Weather and Water Extremes. We've been partnering with them for roughly 15 years on this project. Folks in Colorado, a number of universities, the Department of Water Resources. There's a lot of folks that we've partnered with on this project. But essentially, what this has done as a goal is to utilize advanced forecasting, or really forecasting advancements, our understanding and improvements to weather forecasting, to implement essentially a change to the flood control manual that the Army Corps of Engineers utilizes to operate the reservoir during the winter months. You've probably heard the phrase, "It takes an act of Congress to change things." Well, in this case, that's literally true. Flood control manuals that are essentially the Bible for the U.S. Army Corps in terms of how they manage reservoirs for flood control, have been in place since the 1950s and haven't been updated to incorporate any of the newer science and understanding of and tools available to help manage reservoirs during the winter months. And so due to the reduced water supply reliability at this reservoir, rather than undertake more costly projects to consider, raising the dam or the, possibility of an alternate water supply reservoir at another location, we're simply doing work to identify if we can manage the reservoir for the benefit of keeping more water in the lake during the winter months. So this is a flexible water management approach. It uses, again, data from our watershed monitoring of stream flows, improved weather forecasting, and then we're feeding that data directly to the person at the Bureau who manages the water in the reservoir during the winter months to see if they can selectively retain water at times when no additional storms are indicating a need to release the water to attenuate downstream flooding. This was tested at a pilot level for 5 years by us. We had to apply and get congressional approval to essentially create a buffer pool in the reservoir called the FIRO space. And then we actually tested that a number of years to see if it would adequately work without creating undue risk downstream. So this is an example of a typical supply curve that would occur in a year when we had storm waters entering the reservoir and encroaching on the flood pool. The water managers at the time would simply maintain constant releases to flatline the reservoir at the top of the water supply pool. With this buffer space and with forecasting tools for weather, the water manager is essentially able to look out in time and see if there are any additional storms coming to ensure that they can store water. And in this particular year, I think this was 2019 into 2020, we ended up with an additional 20% of water supply in the reservoir, where in previous years, that water would have been released. So I hope that kind of makes sense of what we're doing with this, this forecast-informed reservoir operations. Another project we're working on is called Advanced Quantitative Precipitation Information Systems. Essentially, this is a project to install some new radar facilities throughout the Bay Area. I'm going to mention in my next slide what we call atmospheric river storms, which are essentially those storms that contribute to all of the flood years and about 50% of all the good water storage years that occur in our area. And not just Sonoma County, really it affects all of California where these atmospheric river storms make landfall. The interesting thing about atmospheric river storms is that you really have to have good weather predictive technology in terms of where they make landfall in order not to create risk for flooding. Atmospheric river storms are really a very focused and narrow band of atmospheric moisture that could be anywhere from 100 to 300 miles in width. And the intensity of these storms are such that understanding where they make landfall is really what's going to drive decision-making by the managers of the reservoirs in terms of whether they can continue to store or have to release the water behind the dam. But in terms of our existing radar technology, most of the C-band radar that we've historically deployed looks higher up in the atmosphere. And one of the unique characteristics that was a result of this research that we've been partnering on is that ARs entrain the moisture in the atmosphere at a much lower altitude. And consequently, our existing radar wasn't predicting with good accuracy where this rainfall was both going to land and then its intensity and what the effect on stream flows and our ability to store water safely in the reservoir or our need to release it timely. So X-band radars are something that we've been partnering with other agencies around the Bay Area to install. These again are focused at an altitude that gets us better eyes on where the atmospheric rivers are going to impact us and get a better idea of where that moisture and the actual inches of rain that are going to hit us, whether they're going to be concentrated in the North Bay, the South Bay, or points to further south. So this is really all feeding into FIRO and feeding into solutions for not only the Potter Valley project, but also for climate change purposes as well. If you haven't really gotten a picture of what an atmospheric river looks like, as I'd mentioned previously, think of them as rivers in the sky. So in this case, you're looking at this band of moisture that's essentially entraining tropical humid air from down around the Hawaiian Islands and mixing with a cold front that's spinning this direction to pull this moisture in a very narrow band and high intensity towards the west coast of California. During El Nino years, when the decadal oscillations that coexist with El Nino years push these storms a little bit further to the south. We tend to have atmospheric rivers that focus more on Southern California. In La Nina years, that oscillation tends to move these atmospheric rivers a bit further to the north, and consequently the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, Portland, Vancouver, tend to get the brunt of those storms. Interestingly, Sonoma County falls right in the middle. And so it's really difficult to say one way or the other from a percentage standpoint, whether in a La Nina year or an El Nino year, we're going to get a higher percentage of atmospheric rivers or not. It's almost equal 50-50. During the last drought buster that occurred in 2022-3, that was a La Nina winter. We were very concerned that we were heading into another dry year that winter, and then we had 12 consecutive atmospheric rivers in a row. We've had similar things occur during an El Nino year. So anyway, having the predictive ability to understand where these make landfall is really key. In terms of other challenges, this is all kind of connected. Climate change, understanding the effect of climate change on atmospheric rivers, given their importance to us in terms of our understanding of water supply and flood control, plays a big role. And I don't think this is new news. It's really kind of outside the purview of what I wanted to touch on. But, you know, historically, if you haven't seen this timeline, it's undeniable that we're under a very human-induced temperature increase due to climate change. And this, you know, last 10-year period, each year has essentially set new records each year for increasing temperature. In terms of what that means for us, you know, some of the studies that we're looking at in terms of downscaled climate prediction modeling, for our area, we're in this unusual kind of no man's land to some degree, but we are looking at condensed wet seasons. So not only for our area, but for those that are relying on snowpack in the Sierra Nevada, what used to fall as snow over the mountains over the course of a number of winter months is now warmer and wetter. So not as much snow, more of the moisture falling as rainfall, even over the higher elevation mountains of the Sierra. In terms of how we manage water supply, and in particular for our region, it means that we have to have better tools for managing water to preserve supply in the reservoir, because the water is going to fall faster, or there's going to be more water falling in a shorter duration. So how do we save some of that water, right? You see a lot of comments in the news about, why are we letting all this river or water flow down the river into the ocean? Why aren't we saving it? Well, FURO is one of the ways we're working to do that. Just better management, cost effectively, to keep more of that water that's falling in that winter season in storage. It does mean longer dry seasons. It also is going to mean more frequent and longer droughts, more extreme flood events. And of course, as we know, as we've experienced in the last few years, definitely a higher incidence of wildfires. In terms of that frequency and longer duration of drought, this is just a long-term temperature scale going back to the late 1890s. What I highlighted here, what it was really interesting is that, you know, the time of the development of all of our water supply infrastructure in the Western states was a very wet time. You know, the frequency of good water supply years versus drought years was pretty markedly different than what we're seeing today, where the good years are becoming less frequent, the dry years are becoming longer duration and higher intensity. So the science behind this is really bearing out in the data. So lots of challenges, but I want to assure you that we're looking at the future, and we have a lot of projects that we're working on as solutions. One of the solutions that we're highly reliant on is water conservation and budgeting. We're trying to improve our ability to budget our water supply in our realm in managing reservoirs. And we're doing a lot in our region and throughout the state to get customers to be better managers of the water at your home and at your business. There is a new regulation that's currently being developed in the state called Making California, or making water conservation a California way of life. There's actually a fourth public rulemaking that just opened for this regulation. It's really directed towards retail water utilities, and I'll touch on that in the next slide. And the way that it'll get passed down to you is it's going to be incumbent on your water utility to make improvements to how they manage their systems for water loss, to continue to provide information and programs to their customers to help you become better managers of your water, to become more efficient at your homes and businesses. And that's going to be driving things for probably the next 15, 20 years and on into the future. Being that you're master gardeners, obviously there's a huge outdoor landscape piece to this. You know, in California, about half of the water use at residences goes towards outdoor water use. So that is going to be one of the main points of focus for us as we go forward. In terms of that regulation, this is really what it's going to amount to. Essentially, retail water agencies are going to be provided a budget for efficient use. So just like you can think about managing an outdoor landscape to a budget, right? You know the size of the landscape, you know the plant material and how much the water needs of the plant to thrive are. You have some information about your local weather. And so with that, you know how to schedule and apportion water so that the plants get what they need, but you're not wasting water in the process. Well, this new water use objective that they're creating for retail water agencies is very similar. They're basically going to use, local population to calculate an efficient bucket of water, if you want to look at it that way, that a water utility needs to serve their customers. In California, that's always been thought of as 55 gallons per person per day. That figure really represents what has been historically thought of as needed to meet health and safety standards. And if you do the math, say at your home, let's say you have 3 people at your home, that's roughly 170 gallons per day for your home. So not hard to meet in our area. And then coupled with that, they're going to create an outdoor water use budget. And this applies to both residential landscape and for landscapes for parks, for HOAs, for commercial businesses and business parks. They're actually providing an outdoor water budget for retail water agencies that's representative of what they would need to meet their customers' demand for outdoor landscape efficiently. And then they'll add to that a water loss target. Essentially, this is for the utilities' maintenance of their distribution system piping. So as you can imagine, pipes underground over time need to be maintained. For every connection to a supply line that we make to serve houses and business, there's some leakage that occurs. There's what we refer to as unavoidable background leakage. But over time, if water rates aren't maintained effectively to be able to keep up with CIP projects that maintain that system, water losses can creep up and up and up. And consequently, the amount of water you have to put in the system to meet the same amount of demand goes up. And so you're not quite managing it effectively over time. We've had a lot of good lessons learned from the East Coast, from areas like the city of Philadelphia and New York that have experienced upwards of 30% water loss. And then we want to avoid that. And a lot of that's been the result of the kicking of the can down the road, let's say, to keep water rates at a level that can help maintain the infrastructure over time. So if you ever want to know where your rates are going, it's to help keep water loss at a minimum and ensure that our systems remain viable so that we can continue to meet demands at what today's rate exists as about 3 to 5. It's about 0.3 to 0.5 of a cent per gallon is essentially what you're paying for. Just looking at this another way, again, for our area, about half of residential water demand is used indoor and half of it goes outdoor, which helps us focus our efforts for the development of our water conservation programs. In this area, we've now been running water efficiency programming that initially focused on indoor efficiency for roughly the last 30 or 35 years, coupled with the removal of older inefficient fixtures through efficiency upgrade programs and improving plumbing code requirements over time. We're really at a point indoors where our efficiency levels don't have a lot further to go, meaning in the winter months when we're not providing water for irrigation, we're typically seeing our GPCD, or gallons per capita per day usage for our region, around 45 to 50. So the state's target for indoor is really going to point to those areas of the state that haven't been implementing efficiency over a long period of time. They're going to be ramping those targets down from 47 down to 42 out in time, but we don't see that as a hard target to meet. And the biggest effort we're going to be focusing on is how to continue to make improvements to the built environment in terms of our landscapes to become more efficient. So with that, if you haven't been to the Sonoma Marin Saving Water Partnership's website, this is really where the bulk of our efforts are focused. Sonoma Water is the lead agency of the Sonoma Marin Saving Water Partnership. This is a coalition of 13 utilities in Sonoma and Marin counties that essentially are partnering regionally to bring outreach and program messaging to customers to more effectively or cost effectively implement programs that would otherwise be more costly to each of the individual utilities to operate separately. There's a wealth of resources and information that we make available. Some of the financial incentive programs are actually implemented by the partner agencies. So for example, City of Santa Rosa or Petaluma or Healdsburg all have financial incentives to help replace older inefficient fixtures or to replace high water using lawns with low water use landscapes. We as Sonoma Water help support their efforts by providing regional programs that break down barriers to participation in those incentive programs, an example of which is the Garden Sense program, where we partner with the master gardeners to help get information out direct to customers that want to do the right thing, but don't know how to take that first step. So if you haven't visited the site and you're going to be talking to the community as part of your volunteer work, we would love it if you'd familiarize yourself with the programs of the partnership so that you can both take advantage of the resources available in the work that you do as a master gardener, but also just to be able to support the efforts of our community to share and save water efficiently. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and we'll open it up for questions.
Here we go. I'll unmute. Yeah, there are a few questions. I had a question. You talked about, groundwater usage, especially in agriculture. What's the plan in terms of, or if there's any plans in terms of regulating groundwater usage more, in a more restricted manner, so that somebody can't come in and just start pumping water to grow? There was an example in Arizona where this happened, where a foreign country came in and started growing hay and drained the aquifer so that the townspeople had no more water, and there was no recourse. So,
yeah, I'm very familiar with that example you cite. They were growing alfalfa for export for cattle operations in Saudi Arabia.
right.
Yeah, it is troubling, and we're, really just getting started with efforts to better manage groundwater sustainably, not just in the Western states, but particularly in California. And that was pointing back to the slide on the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act that was put into place in 2014. There has been a lot of work that's been done to manage groundwater sustainably, but typically on a regional or local level, especially in Sonoma County. These are efforts that we've been underway with here for quite a while. So example, in the Sonoma Valley, we had a sustainable groundwater plan that we put together in collaboration with the USGS back in 2007. So, that groundwater basin is a little bit more impacted and was showing declines, troubling declines. And we were at risk of saltwater intrusion from San Pablo Bay. So to your point, I would say those steps are underway. That regulation does force local agencies to form groundwater sustainability agencies. Those agencies are made up of a coalition of members that include agriculture, urban, residential, businesses, NGOs that all come to the table to help develop groundwater sustainability plans and put into place essentially a fee structure to support the agency's efforts for now ongoing monitoring and testing to ensure that the aquifer levels are being maintained sustainably, and also to look at opportunities to implement programs to develop programs for those outside of urban areas that haven't had the ability to participate in programming previously. In the most recent drought, you might have seen in the news that the governor's emergency declarations included a requirement that counties that issue well permitting, such as our own permit Sonoma, had to then coordinate with the GSAs on any new well permits that were being submitted during that drought period. That drought emergency has been, rescinded, but that I suspect is going to be a continued requirement for new wells to be able to go through a review process of the GSA to better understand the effect of that well in terms of its size and impact on its neighbors, and more importantly, on the aquifer, which is a shared resource by all.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. There's a question from Leslie. What backup plans are there to serve folks who live north of Lake Sonoma, like in a worst case scenario?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think what they're referring to, and this is for everybody else's benefit, is that we really divide the river into two parts, the upper river and the lower river. And the upper river is everything above the confluence of Dry Creek. So essentially that's right around the southern part of Healdsburg, and just north of Windsor is where Dry Creek tributary enters the river. And that's where Lake Sonoma conveys water through. Essentially releases from Lake Sonoma are conveyed down Dry Creek and enter the Russian River and augment stream flow in the river for the lower river users. Above the confluence of Dry Creek, those folks that have riparian rights are really reliant on either the abandoned water that goes through the Potter Valley Project flowing through Lake Mendocino and being released, or natural flow in the river itself. Water rights in the upper river get a little bit more complicated than just the two buckets, because we have 1949 water rights for what we have stored in Lake Mendocino. So we really manage and have senior water rights for anybody that is after 1949. Appropriative water rights holders that have water rights after 1949 during times of drought are really at the mercy of the state board and any adjudication during drought times for what's available. Similarly with riparian rights, in the last 2-year drought period, you experienced an adjudication process because there was no natural flow in the river. And when I say that, I mean, we'll have storage in Lake Mendocino, and we're required to maintain in-stream flows for environmental purposes and fisheries. So when you look out your back window and you see water in the river, it looks like there's water to divert, when in fact, that water is not water that's flowing in the river because of natural flow. It's flowing because we're using our stored water right to release water into the river. And you really have to go back in time and think of what it was like on the river before dams, when you were 100% reliant on tributary flows due to natural rainfall. And in the summer, it was not uncommon for the river to become what they call disconnected, meaning you don't maintain continuous flow. If you go to almost any natural river in California, that's still the case today. You have discontinuous flow in dry summers. And it doesn't mean that there isn't subsurface flow, because you'll see pooled water in sections of the river, then dry portions above ground, and then suddenly there's water again and a little bit of flow, and then it disappears again. That's really the natural course of the river without augmented flows with the reservoir or the Potter Valley project. So our backup plan is FURO. Our backup plan is maintaining the diversion facility at the Eel River in a form that meets the goals of the two-basin solution for fisheries and for users of both Eel River water and Russian River. And then I would say long-term, the Eel River or the Eel Russian Project Authority is going to have to work in a coordinated way for upper water users to mitigate drought, right? And there's going to be a need for conservation. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of the other projects we're involved in also contribute, such as what we call the flood managed aquifer storage and recovery. So there's an effort in the Alexander Valley to take high flow from the river in the winter months and spread it out across the valley floor and the vineyards to help improve groundwater infiltration, so that those reliant on groundwater wells in the valley for agriculture have adequate supplies during those drought times. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah,
But it's going to be a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of a related question you may have answered partially. Is there enough data yet to tell us whether FIRO is effective for the long term? Will FIRO also be applied to Lake Sonoma?
Yeah, I would say yes. Our proof of concept has already been done. We have already approved the control manual change at Lake Mendocino, so we are now operating FIRO. We don't have to apply for like a 5-year permit through the Army Corps to implement that. That's now the new operating procedure for the Army Corps at Lake Mendocino. We are now doing the proof of concept for Lake Sonoma. I do want to stress that every water supply reservoir and every river and the watershed that feeds into it is unique. So you can't take what we do at Lake Mendocino and just blanket apply it to New Bullard's Bar in Oroville, or another reservoir in Colorado, or in this case, Lake Sonoma. You really have to take your time. You have to study the hydrology. You have to understand your stream flow historically and the gauging that you have to rely on, your weather forecasting that's available to you. And then you test it and make sure that you aren't going to put anybody downstream at risk. So we are already in that process with Lake Sonoma. It's going to be a multi-year, phasing to get that done. They're also now doing this in other reservoirs throughout the state. So I mentioned New Bullard's Bar Reservoir. It's one of the larger reservoirs at Lake Oroville, and others throughout the Western US. So it's really fun to be at the leading edge of developing these tools. The Center for Western Weather and Water Streams they have an office in our building, and Dr. Marty Ralph has been collaborating with us for 15 years, and we're super excited to be able to share that out and change the way reservoir management is happening everywhere in the West. So,
very, very cool. A couple more questions. Which county's water supply would be affected by PG&E decommission of the hydroelectric project besides Sonoma?
Was the question which county's water supply?
Which counties, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's upper river. So the city of Ukiah has a connection to the river. By all intents and purposes, they're not concerned. They feel like they have adequate supply for their needs. The Mendocino Inland Water and Power Authority, they have a bit of the supply in Lake Sonoma. Lake Mendocino. But we're working with them. Really, it comes down to the Potter Valley Irrigation District's probably concerned because they rely on that for agriculture, and they really can't make water go backwards cost effectively from Lake Mendocino. So if that diversion weren't maintained, they're pretty much just cut off. And then, of course, you know, there's a lot of smaller agencies in the upper river from Hopland down to Geyserville to Cloverdale, even Healdsburg is kind of at the end of the straw, are all concerned. But they're also all working collaboratively as part of a solution to make sure that we continue to have a solution going forward to maintain that diversion.
Okay. And then what conservation plans are there for agriculture? I mean, you may have answered this with my question, but anything else to add?
Yeah, so there were really two sides to the legislation that was enacted in 2018 for the Making Water Conservation a California Way of Life. A big chunk of that was focused on urban efficiency. The other half was focused on agricultural efficiency. So there is a whole other mechanism working towards implementing agricultural efficiency in the state. That's, you know, largely identified in the updated California Water Plan. I don't want to really get into the weeds too much tonight about the details of that, but it is happening. If you were to look at some of the measures that were enacted during the 10-year drought in Australia, I would just say that a lot of the lessons learned there are really transferable to California. I mentioned one already, FloodMar, which is flood managed aquifer storage and recovery, essentially taking abundant stream flow in the winter months, spreading it out across the valley, whether there's vineyards, orchards, and that, to help recharge aquifers so that those aquifers are being managed sustainably over time, and a variety of other tools and plans.
Okay. And then Petaluma is using recycled water for park irrigation. What uses do we see in the future?
Yeah, so there was a bullet point on the slide that talked about initially Sonoma Water and our water supply. So it's not just surface and groundwater. We do have pretty significant recycled water sources that we make available. So in addition to Petaluma, City of Santa Rosa's Laguna Treatment Plant produces a significant amount of tertiary treated recycled water, both for urban reuse, for park irrigation, and also they have agricultural customers that they provide that water to. If anybody lives in the town of Windsor, all of Windsor's large parks that have been built on the west side of town all rely on recycled water, including both the fire station and the high school for indoor toilet flushing. So the Ellis treatment plant in Petaluma is now providing tertiary. So we do utilize a significant amount of recycled water to offset potable demand. There is a heightened responsibility that comes with the use of recycled water to ensure that our treatment systems are providing a clean and safe product for outdoor uses, including one of the more recent concerns around PFAS. But I'm happy to say that we're already testing for PFAS, and we're mostly getting zero detects from all of our agencies in the area. So that's a really good sign, and both in terms of our industrial waste process water treatment and also our actual potable water from our aquifer. So
yeah, that's really good, because you read about PFAS and it sounds like they're everywhere. So all right, one last question. Are there any lead pipes still around?
You know, that's a good question. I mean, none of the utility infrastructure maintains lead piping. So it's really a matter of the age of the home. This comes up occasionally. It'll make the news, you know, locally in the Press Democrat or one of the other publications. A concern, let's say, will get raised at a school because a drinking fountain being used looks cloudy, and so a parent group is rightfully concerned to make sure that their water for their kids is safe. The school goes through some testing, or they reach out to the local utility to make sure that the water coming to the school is safe. And what I can tell you is that the regulation for testing for potable water in California is really, really high, meaning the bar we have to meet for maximum contaminant levels for a variety of constituents. I mean, we and others test monthly at a huge number of locations throughout our distribution systems to make sure that the water that's arriving to homes and businesses is safe. Once it's in your home, however, the responsibility is passed along. So if you have an older home, I would encourage you to do your due diligence to understand or investigate what your, source pipes are in your home for your plumbing. By and large, there was a reliance on materials in the past that had a lead content. They're not actually lead pipes, by the way. Let's just get that out of the way. But there was a metal pipe that they used to rely on that had a lead content. And although if you're not using the water frequently and the water's sitting in the pipe for an extended contact period, you may have some lead leach into the water in your home. That's more a problem for hot water than it is for cold. But if you have copper, it's not an issue. If you've got a newer home that is either using PEX or PVC, it's not an issue, but really just need to understand your home piping.
Very good. Well, thank you so much. I think I speak for everybody, including some of the people on the chat, that this was a fabulous talk, and so glad you were able to come and join us. And I'm sure we'll be talking to you again. So thanks so much, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, a pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good night, everybody.
I just
Safe
want to
trip.
say thank you all for all the work you're doing. I'm always amazed and impressed at all you do and all you bring to the community in terms of your expertise and experience from all of the areas of life that you've been involved in the past. So not just gardening. I know I've talked to a lot of you. It's really amazing.
Well,
Thanks,
so
Paul. And safe travels back home, Michael. Glad you're getting to go back home. Great news.
Jack Springs is open. So.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Should be an interesting drive home for sure.
All right, everybody.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Paul.
Thank you.
Take care.
Have a good night.